All right. Are we live here? All right. I think we're good to go. So hello, everyone. My name is Andy C. I'm a business development representative with Simpleray, and I just wanted to kick things off here and welcome everyone. This is going to be more of a roundtable style discussion, so I want to include the audience and encourage you all to ask questions as they come up and put them in the chat on the right-hand part of the screen. And we may hit those during the discussion, or at the very least, we'll get to them at the very end. So with that, I want to kick things over to Jeff Gorrie. He's the Director of Energy Services with the Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities, and he's going to be facilitating the discussion today. So Jeff, over to you.
All right, thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Gorrie from IAMU. Super excited that everyone was able to join today, and really looking forward to this talk we're about to have. And it's all geared around small utility scale solar in the Midwest. And you know, we've assembled a team of experts to talk on this subject today. We have myself, who will act as the moderator of the conversation. We also have Tyler Anderson, who is the president of Simpleray. We also have Chris Ball, a utility solar specialist, and Warren McKenna, who is the former GM of Farms Electric Co-op, and just kind of a general jack of trades when it comes to all things solar. You know, as Andy was saying before, we want there to be a lot of discussion. We want it to be interactive, so please do put your questions in the chat bar on the kind of the general format. The way this is going to go is, in the beginning, I'm going to prompt some of our experts with questions. We'll get some brief information about solar. And then towards the end, we've reserved a large amount of time, the majority of this for question and answer. So with that, I will go ahead and kick it over to Tyler Anderson, who's the president of Simpleray. Tyler, I'm going to go ahead and ask you, what opportunities do you see for small utility scale solar, and why is Simpleray in the utility and municipal space?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Just a little bit of background on Simpleray. I actually started the company about 13 years ago. At that time, we were focused more on smaller projects with agricultural, residential, smaller commercial. And about 7 years ago, we started to get into the commercial industrial space, and which is similar in size overall to some of these smaller utility scale projects. Currently, we have over 50 team members. We're vertically integrated, so we do everything from the project development side, looking at land acquisition, through procurement, through construction, operation, as well as maintenance. We have different partnerships throughout the industry, so we'll partner with developers and kind of handle a lot of their back-end work after they have a viable project. We'll work with asset owners to get it to like a turnkey, as well as just different contractors through it's like wastewater treatment plant builders and different just contractors like that in similar industries, so we can help them on those projects. So most of the time we're working on projects up to 5 megawatt. Recently, at least particularly in Iowa and throughout the region, we're getting into more actual utility scale development, so up to the 100 megawatt range. So for Simpleray, we typically work in Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Missouri. We will travel outside of those areas, but that's our primary focus. So we have a couple slides here. This is actually a pedigree project we built last year, and actually won a couple awards for. If you look at it when you're flying into O'Hare, if you look down, flying from the northwest, you can see a dog bone and a paw. So we can do some custom work like that. It's a nice marketing piece. So you focus on the CNI space, as well as smaller scale utilities, wastewater treatment plants, schools. We can really make it work for just about anybody. Thought it'd be worth going through our typical process on the front end. We'll just look at the initial analysis. We'll kind of come in, look at your existing rate structures, your existing costs, what your future goals are, even over the next couple decades. And we tried to engineer a process not only from the nuts and bolts pieces, but from a financing aspect. So it's not only easy to build, but also to execute. So we'll try to make the project's cash flow from day one, or save up to 5 to 10% off of your existing energy costs, typically. So we'll do that initial analysis. We can come in, design the system. We'll actually do the specialized contracting in-house. So we have boring, post-driving in-house, drone services, we have crane services. Then through some of those other partnerships, we'll bring in for the actual mechanical installation where needed on those bigger projects. And ultimately, we can help get the projects financed for you and save you some money. I did want to talk about kind of how we've gotten here in the Midwest, or kind of the current state of the market. Just a lot of this will be Iowa focused. I know we have some people from outside of that region in here. Welcome, but a lot of our expertise is in Iowa and just in Illinois. So, I mean, even thinking back a couple of years ago, the biggest array in the state was 5 megawatts. It's not that it doesn't work here at a bigger scale. It's just kind of an underserved market, I guess, and it's just really not knowing that it pencils out well here. I mean, it's kind of thought to be on the coast. They have higher energy costs. There's like the environmental reasons. I could take an economic approach, though, and I can tell you it does work here. It's just need to get the word out, and I really appreciate IAMU partnering up with us today, and try to help get that word out. I did want to touch on a few of the bigger misconceptions that we run into. One of the biggest ones is it's too expensive. We're only doing it for environmental reasons. It just doesn't make sense for us, especially in some of these smaller areas that they are smaller projects. They do pencil out, though. I mean, over the last 10 years, I want to say the cost of solar dropped 75 to 85%, which definitely helps when you combine that with some creative financing structures. Can really make a lot of sense. Let's see. Why we're in the utilities market. That was the other question there. Sorry. I get asked this a lot, actually. So we have a lot of partners. They're on the coast. They're saying, Tyler, why are you guys in Iowa? Everything's going on the coasts. It really does go back to an underserved market. I mean, I'm from Iowa. I really want to help some of these smaller these communities save some money, but I mean, it does work here. I've looked through all of the ME1 filings that you guys have done, and I would say that we can save people a lot of money through some of these projects. And let's see. Sorry, my notes decided to minimize there. Well, just wing it. Okay. Technical difficulties are always fun. Anyway, I would say there's a lot of coming developments really in the storage space with the derecho that went through Iowa, kind of what's been going on in Texas. There's been a lot of the discussion around resiliency. And I mean, storage is a big aspect of that. A lot of that also goes into just generation, say natural gas even, and just the controls to make everything work in concert. So I think we'll see a lot of more of that over the next 5 years or so. I would say a lot of these rural utilities are set up for it. I mean, a lot of this generation is 40 to 60 years old in some of these cases. We can utilize those. So just a matter of figuring out the controls. But I'll actually turn it over to Chris and Warren. They can talk about their individual projects for Kelowna at Farmers Electric as well as Bloomfield. But yeah, you guys can take it away.
All right. Hey, thanks, Tyler. I appreciate that. Really good stuff. Very, very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and transition to Warren. And Warren, I wanted to ask you here, from a utility perspective, can you tell us about the project that you did at Farmers Electric Co-op? What were some factors that went into your decision making, and also some benefits seen and unseen with this project?
So, I'm getting a little echo here for some reason. Well, I'll try to continue. This is a 2 megawatt, 2-part project. Do you guys hear this echo?
I do not hear a echo, Warren.
I'm not sure why. Okay. Darn it. Well, in about 2008, we started this solar vision to produce 25% of our energy from inside sources, and it took this solar farm. And the first part, about the middle, was done on a purchase power agreement with Eagle Point Solar out of Dubuque, Barry Shear. And the second part was done with Simpleray, which was done under a lease and a purchase power agreement. The capacity was used to reduce our peak demand and also our kilowatt hour consumption. I'm getting a real bad echo, so if I'm pausing a little bit. But the transmission savings occurred about 40 to 60% of the time. And we're currently trying to register this farm in the MISO credits system. There's currently about 3 gigawatts in the MISO queue for Iowa. So there's incredible growth over the last 2-3 years. That's about all I have.
Very nice. Yeah, that's great, Warren. I appreciate that. Are you able to speak at all how much you guys were able to, kind of shave off that peak demand?
So both of these farms were at net revenue, so they pay for themselves basically through demand and energy savings. I'm not sure what the actual, if it's about a megawatt off the total demand. Average probably around 6, 7, some months 8% in energy kilowatt hour savings. They greatly increased our load factor and also reduced line losses. And they're coupled with 6 megawatt of diesel generation that ran about 10 hours a year. And we also, aside from that, had a solar garden in the site solar schools program. So when we were done there, we ended up with about 18% of our kilowatt hour purchases for the year.
That's great. I'm going to go ahead and forward this question to you now, Warren, because I think specific to this project. We've got a question from Isaiah Burrell, which is, did you get the RECs or did the installing company keep the RECs?
So on the back half, the north part of that, we got a state credit on those RECs. We sold those to a local bank, and those flowed directly back to us at 100%. On the front half, it's under a separate PPA, and I'm assuming they gather the credits on those.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. And for anyone who doesn't know, REC is renewable energy credit, correct?
Well, in the state of Iowa, there's a carve out from state tax credit that's based on consumption or generation.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you for that question, Isaiah. Appreciate that. And thank you, Warren. I appreciate it. It's always good to hear the perspective of someone who's on the co-op or the utility side when it comes to these solar projects. So thanks, Warren. I'm going to take it back and I'm going to move on to Chris Ball. Chris, thanks for being here. I do have one question for you. That is, you know, Chris, you're a utility specialist with Simpleray, but you've also been directly involved with a utility scale project at Bloomfield, Iowa Municipal Utility in the town of Bloomfield. You know, what can you tell us about that experience with the Muni, you know, deploying this large solar array? You know, what were your experiences, and, you know, how did this work for the utility?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, my name is Chris Ball, and I've been with Simpleray for a while now. Before that, I did work for the city of Bloomfield in their municipal utilities, several different departments. By the way, Jeff, thanks for helping put this together. I think it's awesome that the Association of Municipal Utilities is partnering up with developers to make this kind of information available. Really appreciate it. You know, working with a muni utility is a little different than the REC because we're public, and so we have to go through a little different process than an REC or a private entity would have to go through. Another thing that makes us a little unique, or makes a muni utility unique, is that, well, like in Bloomfield's case, the city council was the oversight, the management of not only the city government, but also water, gas, electric, and sewer utilities. There's no, in their case, there's no separate board for any of those utilities. So you've got these members of the council that have all kinds of responsibilities and don't really have a lot of expertise in any one of those particular utilities typically. And so really, there was a lot of reliance on the staff to put together projects, make recommendations, do the strategic planning, and then provide that information to the city council for oversight. And that creates something kind of unique, because when the council has all these different things to deal with, lots of times there's a lot of topics that get discussed for a long time before they get executed. So in this case, I think we were talking about adding solar to our energy supply mix for anywhere between a year and a year and a half before we decided to pull the trigger. It took a lot of discussion to get there. And at the same time, we had several different things going on with our overall energy strategy in Bloomfield. So, you know, Warren talked a little bit about why Kelowna Farmers Electric got into solar. For Bloomfield, there was a couple different reasons. One was that we've been a municipal electric utility, I think, since 1892. Been producing power, started then with steam. Since then, the city has added natural gas and diesel generators. And so it was kind of natural for them to begin looking at new types of electric generation and adding that to the supply. The city does purchase most of their electricity, but it did make sense from a resiliency and a redundancy perspective to have some local generation other than their diesel and gas. So that was one thing that they looked at when they were adding solar. And also, the city had experienced, probably over the last 10 years, 3 to 4 rate increases, primarily on the peak energy side, the peak demand side of their electric purchases. And so they were concerned about future rate increases and saw solar as one opportunity to hedge against future rate increases. And of course, there were people in the community that were interested in the green renewable energy side of adding solar, and also, I think there was also some interest in Bloomfield having this size, a project this size, for kind of putting a spotlight on the community. So the town is about 2,500 people, and this array supplies about 10% of the total energy on an annual basis. So it's a pretty good, it's a big impact on this community. I'd like to talk a little bit about the process, because once we decided to move forward with the project, or the city decided to move forward with the project, it was about 6 months from the time that we contacted an engineer until most of the major construction and of the project was complete. We worked with an Iowa engineer that had done solar arrays, worked with getting solar arrays procured and designed in the past. They helped us to put together a request for proposals. That RFP went out. It was published so that anyone could respond to it. And then that engineer also opened the responses, tabulated the results, and recommended the apparent lowest bidder, which in this case was Simpleray, or at that time, Iowa Wind and Solar. The city wasn't sure how we were going to finance the project. So in our responses, we asked, or in the RFP, we asked the respondents to provide both a cash purchase option as well as a power purchase agreement option. I think that added some complexity to the project and maybe limited the number of respondents. And so when I get in a little later talking about the lessons learned, I'll come back to that. One thing that was unique about this project in terms of how the city typically structures infrastructure projects is that the city put together they did all of the AC work, put in all the AC wiring, thinking that it would, we had the capacity on hand because we had electricians and linemen that could do that work, and we thought it would save money in the end over the total cost of the project, which probably is a good place to segue into some lessons learned. One of the things we learned after the project completion was that it's perfectly fine for the city to do that work. However, it still didn't it didn't remove the responsibility of going through the public bid process with regards to infrastructure. So what I'm saying is that because the AC wiring, the estimated cost of doing that AC wiring was above the public infrastructure threshold for bids, what we should have done was release a bid for that, or an RFP for that AC wiring. And if the city wanted to complete it, we should have put a bid in on that project. So looking back, we probably wouldn't have done it that way. The city probably would have opted to do one contractor for the entire project. See, other lessons learned, the location on our distribution system, on the city's distribution system, was, we put the array at the edge of town, which is probably what many other municipalities would do. And it was connected through 2 feeders. And looking back, it probably would have been a better decision to run a dedicated line back to, we have one substation in the city, and it probably would have been better to build a dedicated line back to the substation from the array. It would have helped us to have more flexibility in how we distributed power from the array, and we maybe could have saved some line loss by upping the voltage between the array and the substation.
Chris, just to interject there, that's super interesting. Do you know rough estimate of what the cost increase would be by having done that a little bit differently for this project?
I think so. It's about a mile of line that would have had to go between the array and the substation. And I don't know what the current cost for a mile of that line would be right now.
Sure.
We might have been able to use some, because we have some existing poles, for example, we might have been able to utilize. And so I don't really know the cost, but probably those folks out there that do this work would know what a mile of line would cost.
Yep. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. That's why we're all here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a good time to turn it over for questions. I do want to say, though, that overall, I think the project's been successful. I don't have the current numbers on what the city pays for electricity since I'm no longer employed there, but I know that during the first year of operation that the power received from the array was at a lower cost than the power that they were purchasing elsewhere when you look at the total blended cost. And one of the reasons, I need to bring this up, when we did all of our modeling and our projections, we actually expected that energy to cost a little more initially because we expected power prices to increase over the years, and we thought the first handful of years that the price of the electricity would be more than our current supplier. But what we didn't account for was we did all of our modeling based on average sun hours, and when we got into extreme events like it was really warm outside and a bright sunny day, people are kicking on their their air conditioning, and the solar was cranking out electricity. So it really cut down our peak demand on those extreme days, and the city realized substantial savings on those specific days that caused the whole project annually for us to save money. So anyway, with that, Jeff, thanks, and let's get to some questions.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it. I think you bring a really good perspective on that, having, worked for the city and implemented this pretty large array for Iowa, 1.86 megawatts. That's, a very good size. So I appreciate your input there. Before I get into some questions, I do want to remind everyone, bottom of your screen, there should be a section that says ask a question, followed by the number 2 right now. If you throw your questions in there, that'll help us maybe keep them more organized. And any general discussion, of course, feel free to go into the chat bar. I see there's some good discussion there, so I appreciate that. So right off the bat, we have a question from Ryan Baggett. I hope I'm saying that correct, Ryan. The question is, and this is already spoken upon a little bit in the chat, but I wanted to bring it up for the group. When can we expect to see massive rollouts of megawatt scale solar carports over parking lots of large retailers? Ryan also said, it seems like there are all sorts of reasons why this would work, especially now. And I will leave it up to the panel of experts to decide who would like to take this one.
I can touch on that for just a second.
Go ahead.
I think carports they'll be a little more common in the coming years. So there's just within the solar industry, there's a bigger push for larger modules. So I think they're just calling them large format modules at this point. So today, where we're using, say, anywhere from a 400 watt module to 450 watt modules, they're pushing into the 650 watt range. And that'll actually drive a lot of those costs down on those large carports. With that being said, some of these utility rates are also very low. So I think it'll be more common, say, so say, wastewater treatment plants or schools or places with existing large parking lots that are landlocked. I could definitely see a lot of potential there, but really large scale, yeah, I guess we'll see. But it's heavily cost dependent.
So, Tyler, when you've looked at these, do you know if the entities that are asking you to look at, are they factoring in the impact of carports on the maintenance of the parking lot? Right. I mean, I would think that reduced sun hours or reduced flexing in the heating and cooling of the parking surface would reduce the amount of maintenance and could help be a cost factor.
Yeah, it's definitely been a consideration. I mean, the biggest one has been just in the winter, say snow removal, removing a lot of those costs, or even just the liability of that. Quantifying a lot of those, I think, is a little more difficult, but I would definitely be interested in seeing how that pencils out. But I don't have any of those numbers, unfortunately.
Good deal. That's a great answer, and I appreciate that. I'm going to take it back now and go ahead and ask a question on behalf of Chris Goldberg. Thank you for the question, Chris. So I think this might be a question specifically for Warren, but we could probably all talk about this. The question is, has Farmers Electric Co-op thought of pairing solar arrays with electric vehicle charging stations?
So they have not. However, some of the EV owners, including myself, do park our smart car under the solar array.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, you know, for the folks inside of Iowa, you're probably already familiar with this project. But for folks outside, we have a colleague at Iowa State University, go Cyclones, named Ann Kimber, who has worked on a project called the Crate, which is, you know, it's essentially a shipping container with solar panels on top and Tesla power walls inside, right? And it's meant to be deployed to help different communities when there is an extreme weather event, to help with resiliency and providing power where it's needed, and or a central location for people in town to come and charge their you know, devices. But one thing that this question reminded me of that project was that you know, this solar crate is just sitting in front of the City of Ames City Hall, and you know, they do have a charger connected to these solar panels. It's very easy for them to do, and they do offer free charging for EVs in front of Ames City Hall. You know, where the charger is literally on the same you know, storage crate that the solar panels are on top. So me personally, I think it's great to combine EV charging with your solar and, you know, totally decarbonize you know, your transportation. So did you guys have any other points you wanted to make on that, pairing EVs with solar? All right, good deal. I appreciate that question. Thank you, Chris. So we've got another question by Chris here. He wants to know, this is more for the Simpleray folks. You know, is Trusted Energy Company a competitor of yours, Simpleray? And if so, what do you do different from them? You know, and I would just add on to that question. Maybe you Simpleray folks could tell a little bit about some of the different solar installers and providers in Iowa, and maybe talk a little bit more about who's doing a turnkey solution and whether or not that's something that you do.
Sure. So I'm not all that familiar with Trusted. I mean, I know they're up in northwest Iowa, I believe. I do think we're competitors on a lot of our commercial industrial projects. Not sure that we've bid against anybody on utility projects. I guess just to touch on us, so we do, I mean, we have quite a few partnerships in different areas. So sometimes we'll partner with an existing electrical firm, and then we'll bring in the solar aspect and help them out on that side. Sometimes we'll partner with a developer where they're doing land acquisition and project development, and then we'll take it from that point and actually build it and do the operation and maintenance. So I guess similar in that.
I would add,
we'll actually partner. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I thought you were finished, Tyler. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, some of these smaller companies too that we've partnered with just in other areas or in other states outside of Iowa. So they're focusing on the commercial industrial space now, maybe even residential. We're more than happy to work together on those projects, kind of bring our expertise to the table, work together, and kind of see the project through.
I guess I would add to that. I don't know that it's maybe really appropriate for Simpleray to talk about competitors too much, but I would say that going to the Iowa Solar Energy Trade Association, there's an active group of project developers and installers, and that's a great resource for learning more.
Yep, I'll just piggyback on that, Chris. That is a great resource. Great organization doing the good work. So if you folks out there in Iowa looking into solar, that might be a good jumping off point for you. Real quick, we also had some other questions that were sent in for the meeting. Thank you to everyone who sent those in. I did not record who asked these, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through and ask them. But this question I have is, can you talk about the different mounting types for solar, and maybe talk about when a solar panel is fixed or static, and solar panel is part of a tracking array and is dynamic?
Sure, I can actually take that. So on a lot of these projects, specifically utility, they'll be ground mount, of course. Although we can put them on the roof, but that's typically the most economical, especially at this scale. So you have a fixed mount similar to Warren's at Farmers Electric. If you want to bring up that slide, maybe. So that's fixed. It's regional what the tilt angle is, but I think we mounted that one at 25 degrees. Typically it's 25 to 30 degrees. We can adjust that if necessary based on different financials, I guess. So sometimes it makes sense to go to a lower tilt angle to increase the density on the site. That also increases some of your summer production, where you have some of those high peaks that Chris was mentioning. There's also a single axis tracker like we installed for Bloomfield. So that will track from east to west on an annual basis. Again, Iowa numbers, but typically it would be an 18% increase in overall output. One big benefit on that side is in those utility instances where you don't have net metering and it's just needs to be consumed at the time of generation or stored, of course. It helps with those shoulder hours. So say if you're really heavy in residential loads, it'll actually pick up some of those in the early morning, as well as when people are coming home from work. You kind of increase to those hours, or you increase your chances that it's going to shave your demand during those hours.
Nice. Tyler, go ahead, Chris. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that in Bloomfield's case, what Tyler described is exactly what we were looking for. We have a very residentially driven load. So we see 7 a.m. in the winter, we tend to see early morning peaks, and in the evening, in the summer and spring and fall, we tend to see evening peaks. And so what that tracking does is take our solar production curve and take it from a bell shape to flatten it out and spread that production out over those hours and really add some additional production in the morning and the evening. It worked really well.
Good deal. Appreciate the answer to that question. So we had another question come in from the crowd. So I'm going to change up our schedule here a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this. The question is, agrivoltaics been considered beyond pollinator-friendly habitats? And this is my question. Could you explain agrivoltaics?
That's a perfect Warren question. You want to
No,
talk about solar sheep?
yeah, solar sheep is what we use, and they work great. So there's a much chance for a pollinator to survive in that instance as it gets eaten, but it does. I think it would make a great pollinator project for a large solar farm. You need some kind of cover rather than fill it with rock, basically.
Yep.
I think I've seen a webinar somewhere after this. Is it on Agra? Maybe I missed. I thought there was something on. I don't know if it was sheep oriented, but you can't.
I
put
saw
goats,
that too.
Yeah, you can't put goats in here, but sheep definitely work. And I don't know why you couldn't put beehives. I have some friends that do bees, and if you had some pollinators in there, you could do a whole project. Yeah.
I think there's been some studies that have shown that when you have raised solar panels over crops, you'll see some increased productivity on the crops because there's less evapotranspiration, right, that occurs. I don't know of any projects in Iowa that are doing that, or and I can't put my hands on those studies, but I know I have seen that there have been some benefits to that type of in those scenarios.
Yep, and I'll just go ahead and piggyback on those things. You know, going back to the city of Ames again, they did a 2.1 megawatt solar field that was completed in November, and they actually partnered with, I forget if it was the DNR or it was something with you know, some government agency, but they partnered with them to spread a bunch of seeds for pollinators. So, you know, on the topic of save the bees and, you know, how can we introduce more indigenous plants into our community spaces? You know, there are partnerships out there where you can get pollinators around your solar array and have a bunch of different intangible benefits to your project. So that's great. Great question. And the person who asked that question was Keith Fouts. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to questions that were asked before today's webinar. The next question I have is, can one of the experts on our panel talk about some tech advancements? In particular, one thing I didn't know about was bifacials. So if you could touch on that. And then, you know, early Tyler, you were talking about single axis tracking. Does that imply existence of two axis tracking?
Yes, that is a thing. It's not all that common just because of the amount of ground space that it requires. I typically would see, especially on small scale projects, you could see that on, I know they've had, actually Warren had that old ZomeWorks there. So some of those smaller projects like residential and smaller commercial projects, they'll have some dual axis trackers that'll track it both north, south, as well as east, west. But most large scale development is single axis just because of the amount of ground space that it saves.
So we did use those Zoom trackers, Zome, I guess they call it, at the school projects for educational purposes.
Very nice, very nice. You know, I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about trackers, and now that I know that dual axis tracking exists, I feel very enlightened. But the next question I have is, you know, why should tracking be considered in certain situations and not other situations?
Sure, I think it's very site dependent. Also, just the scale of the project. It typically makes sense from a financial standpoint, but if you have a lot of rolling hills, sometimes that's a limitation. We can look at grading those sites as well, but I would say in the vast majority of cases, it's more cost effective to track. And actually, just as an extension of that, we get asked a lot just on the operation and maintenance side, like how much do you actually have to maintain those? Not a lot, actually. So there's, I mean, I forget how many gigawatts of single axis trackers are out in the field, but it's minimal maintenance and of just I mean, you have to go grease the gearboxes, for example, but I mean, the cost of that far outweighs the benefits far outweighs the cost of doing that.
Tyler, I apologize if you said this. Can you give a metric for percent increase generation you do tracking versus a static array?
Yeah. So typically it's 18%, at least here in Iowa. Very regional dependent, but yeah, it widens the operating hours pretty significantly.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. We've got another question here. Could you discuss solar versus other types of generation?
I mean, there's solar wind. We did evaluate wind down in our area. The capacity factors. I mean, solar had an advantage, a huge advantage over wind. Plus, we were targeting the peak demand, so it's a little more controllable with solar than it is with wind. And yeah, we got a little higher kilowatt hour value out of the solar.
Yeah, and I would say that in Bloomfield's case, when we were doing an evaluation, you know, we have the city owns natural gas and diesel generation right now that they do not operate on a daily basis. And one of the primary reasons is because you have to have personnel there to run those plants. And so one of the huge advantages for us with solar was you put it in place and the daily operational cost is minimal, if anything.
And I do know there was 6 megawatt of diesel at Farmers, and that in the last 2-week cold snap we had here, it probably ran 4 days. It's at the market over 20 cents, I believe, a kilowatt, $200 a megawatt. So wow. That's a natural hedge, but it couples with the solar nicely. So.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Warren, that kind of leads us into our next question here. You know, over the summer, Iowa was hit by the derecho. For those folks outside of state who don't know what that was basically a meteorological phenomenon where there were consistent, sustained, straight line winds, you know, for more than an hour at a time. And basically it was like, you know, the effects of a tornado, but rather than in one part of a town, it was across the entire state. And so we had massive loss of power, you know, customers without electricity for days, you know, and that all kind of reminds us of the thing that happened last week in Texas with ERCOT, where, you know, their power generation was highly affected by extreme cold weathers, not common to the climate in the area. And so with all those things in mind, I guess the big question that I have for the panel is, can you talk about how solar fits into, you know, into different portfolios of generation for resiliency, how it can help your grid's resiliency, talk about some design considerations when it comes to cold weather performance, and maybe even throw in something on microgrids in there. That's a lot to ask, but take it away, experts.
Tyler, let's hear your sales pitch here.
Sure, I can throw something out there. So I guess just to touch on Texas. So the interesting thing with solar is that actually it produces more in those cold, during those cold temperatures. I actually posted a video not too long ago just talking about that. But as the temperature decreases, it actually makes the modules themselves more efficient. So solar works great in that environment. Can't really touch on the wind side of that too much. But I know, I mean, even looking at Northwest Iowa or just Iowa, it's cold. It works here. Let's see, what were the other questions? Oh, microgrids.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, as long as you have the controls in place to have it work with your existing generation, it works. If you get too much solar, say your solar exceeds your base load, for example, you might have to curtail some of that or install some batteries to help with some of that. But yeah, I mean, the controls to make that happen, they're pretty simple. Yeah, I mean, in that case, I mean, you're offsetting diesel generation costs. I don't know how much that costs, or maybe Warren can touch on that point, but say you cut a meg or two off of your diesel generation during those times where you're grid down. I don't know how much that saves, but yeah, I think we'll see more of that in the next coming 5-10 years, really. Even storage is making more sense. And the natural progression there is just starting to integrate it with some of those existing gen sets and making them all work in concert with each other.
Very nice.
Yeah, to add on to that, yeah, I know, like when we went through this cold snap recently, you know, Bloomfield also operated its gen sets, and typically we would see, I think just the fuel cost is, at least when I was last at the city, the fuel cost for operating those gen sets was somewhere around 6 to 7 kilowatts, or 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. Of course, that didn't include any operation, labor, maintenance, anything like that. And that was with contracted gas prices. So it depends on each utility's gas supply. However, obviously during that snap, the gas prices skyrocketed, right? So that would significantly elevated those costs to operate the generators. Meanwhile, the renewable resources were operating as they always had at the same cost structure. Tyler, maybe you could talk a little bit about, or Warren, either one, talking about how islanding versus interconnected scenarios, and when you would use solar in an interconnected versus an islanded scenario. Or maybe not.
No,
I mean, in particular, I guess I wasn't sure what the question was.
Well, I'm just saying, how to phrase that differently, you know, is solar often used as a backup source when the power goes out? And can it be used as a backup source?
I think as we see storage come on, definitely. Now, we were a part of a larger buying group spread across to Iowa. We were taking low-cost wind when it's available. So we're not on a firm power contract long-term. So only about 50% of the power was firm. The rest we could take on a price basis, and you take a lot of wind, which is now coming in at a lower price. And then you're for the additional needs beyond what the solar produces. And then what you're really, part of what you're cutting with the local solar as well is that peak. So there's a substantial savings there. As far as islanding, I think you're going to need probably some storage in the future to make that really reliable, but the diesels also work real nice, and it islands well. It works with the solar. So there's a microgrid going on right now in a maybe not as 100% that storage would get us there, but it's working pretty well. As far as reliability, I think our little co-op had some of the best numbers in Iowa, and I'd venture to say if we were in Texas, we'd also be true.
Just to add on to the microgrid conversation, I will say that you know, both Simpleray and IAMU are kind of working on some different microgrid ideas for grant projects, and I would just say, stay tuned to our social media for follow up on that here in a few months. So next up, I think may have been covered already, but I kind of hear more about this. Can you talk about solar and how that fits into the conversation around dirt power, force versus non-commutated power?
Sure. So that's one thing we ran into quite a bit back in the day. It's just solar is going to cause some grid instability. It's it's dirty, I guess. But yeah, so I guess the way that the solar inverters work, it analyzes the grid, and then after what is it? I think it's 5 minutes off the top of my head. If the grid's stable, then it'll backfeed. There's certain parameters that we can actually adjust within each of those inverters, kind of like ramp up or ramp down, or what else? Yeah, I mean, it's safety focused, really. As much as like it's not just about dirty power, but it's just matching whatever the grid voltage is. It's not forcing itself upon the grid so much as it's just analyzing it and then working with it. You described that very well, but that's
no, you're right, Tyler. It is safety focused, and because the grid will take a lot of solar. I mean, at farmers on a light load Sunday, the solar can be producing 100% of the power in certain times of the day without, sure, it's grid tied with the transmission line, but it's very stable power. So most of this features are safety focused from backfeed. When a power fails or you have interruptions, basically, it drops out. And momentarily, I mean, it just doesn't happen that much. So,
yeah.
Good deal. Well, I see here on this webinar, we have about 2 minutes left. So thank you so much to everyone for asking questions. I did kind of want to end this session by going around our panel of experts and having you all answer the same question, which is, what predictions do you have for small scale utility projects in the Midwest next year and the next decade? And let's go, Tyler. Oh, Chris, go ahead. You got it, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, going back to one of the comments from our audience about EVs, I think we're going to see EVs come on big over the next decade. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a shock to the system for these smaller utilities. And so they need adding solar now. I mean, we've been in kind of a point for the last year, 2 years where prices for electricity have held steady or dropped maybe a little bit in some of these smaller communities. But I think as EVs come on and we see fuel switching happening, you're going to see those prices go up if communities aren't being proactive in getting capacity in place prior to that.
And I'll be real quick. I think the highest growth area is going to be solar storage. It's power banks and power walls, and coupled with EVs are going to be the fastest growing segment of the market.
Yeah, I guess on my side, I would say just overall general greater penetration. And a lot of these smaller utilities are looking at this as a form of generation. And it's just that kind of, it helps other utilities just understand what those benefits are. It gives them some more metrics. I think that'll help drive a lot of that. Storage will definitely help start to at least control the power, do some of that peak shaving. Let's see.
No, John Wellinghoff, the former head of FERC, said solar will overtake all other forms of generation. And I believe it's true.
Yeah. That'd be good.
It's a good prediction there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what happens in on the transmission side. Actually, is one thing we're really keeping an eye on. I mean, if you think about it, since like on our side, we're backfeeding directly to distribution, so you don't have any transmission charges. But that's one thing we're keeping an eye on, just seeing. I mean, as you have these hundreds and hundreds of megawatts deployed out in the field, what's that going to do to those costs? What happens as some of these older coal plants shut down? I think it'll be an interesting next 10 years.
Yep. That's great. Yeah, great answers, guys. Always fun to look forward into the future and talk about what we see, and I think that's good. But just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who attended today and participated in our table discussion. You're all very welcome to email me if you have any follow-up questions. Also to tyler@simpleray.com for questions related to utility solar. That would be Tyler Anderson's email. Just a reminder that IAMU is planning to have webinars every 2 weeks. So we will have a webinar 2 weeks from today. It'll probably be another lunch and learn. That would be, it's actually going to be 13 days from today. That'll be on March 10th. And that'll have to do with alternative method financing energy efficiency projects. I'll also say that I would like to do another webinar with Simpleray again in the future. We had a lot of interest around this solar stuff, and if you have any questions or recommendations for future webinars, whether it's around solar or different topics you'd like to see, feel free to drop me an email. And at IAMU, we exist solely to provide value to our members. And so if there are questions you have around this topic, or you're considering a project, or you need some technical advice, some engineering support, as always, feel free to contact me. That's kind of my spiel at the end of this. Andy, if you wanted to tag anything on there, or any of the other guys, any of the other experts on this call, feel free to go ahead now.
I didn't have anything else to add, but thank you, Jeff, for partnering with us on this. And again, if anybody has any questions, as he mentioned, you can reach out to Tyler at simpleray.com, or general questions to hello@. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Good deal. Thanks guys. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, more than happy to look at any projects. If you want to send us some data, any numbers you have, more than happy to help. If you think it might not work, or if you have something that you historically thought didn't work, more than happy to look at it and give it a second opinion. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great day.
Thank you.